but only if you genuinely enjoy stepping into the past with me. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up near Boston in early 1776. The good news? You're part of a cause that's stirring spirits across the land. The bad news? Everything else. Your bed is likely a makeshift pile of straw in a crowded tent or a repurposed barn, and the air hangs thick with the smell of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and something you'd rather not identify. Probably a combination of stale food and the ever-present consequences of inadequate sanitation. You're a soldier in this new American army, or perhaps you're just trying to catch a glimpse of it from the packed roadsides, hoping for a glimpse of the king or Parliament's notables if you were back in London, or perhaps hoping for a glimpse of General George Washington if you are here in America. This is hardly the polished, disciplined force you might imagine. General John Burgoyne, a British officer, has already dismissed the American soldiers as a rabble in arms, and honestly, looking around, you might see why. Your comrades are a bewildering mix: farmers, artisans, fishermen, clad in whatever homespun clothes they could throw together before trudging off to war, often in tatters, unwashed, unshaven, with hair matted and beards long. There are young boys, barely 15, and older men who've seen 60 or more years of hard living. Some are missing teeth, others fingers, casualties of a time when life was simply tougher and accidents were common. You might even see Negroes and Indians among the ranks, particularly in the Rhode Island regiments, proving themselves equally serviceable for fatigue and action, many having already shown themselves brave. The food, surprisingly, isn't terrible, at least not yet. You can count on meat or fish most days, and fresh produce is available at low prices rolling into the camps. You might even enjoy a breakfast of warm bread, good camp butter, and a dish of coffee, or a hearty dinner of pork and cabbage. But for every decent meal, there's the ever-present threat of disease. Camp fever, dysentery, typhus, and typhoid fever sweep through the ranks, turning camps into breeding grounds for sickness and death. Latrines are often open pits, and too many men neglect to use them properly, leaving excrement scattered around the fields, a pernicious habit that contributes to the vile stench hanging over the camps. Cleanliness is understood to be the killer of disease, but despite orders insisting on personal hygiene, clean cooking utensils, and clean water, washing clothes is considered women's work, and there aren't many women in the American camps doing laundry like there are with the British troops. The army you've joined is largely untested, its officers often as ignorant of military life as the troops they lead, according to observers. They were elected by the men, and many are more concerned with popularity than discipline. You hear stories of men being flogged, put on the wooden horse, or drummed out of camp for drunkenness or minor infractions. Punishments Washington has ordered to bring order to this rabble. But change comes maddeningly slow. Despite the efforts, a British ship surgeon who visited some of the rebel camps described roads crowded with carts and wagons hauling provisions, but also inordinate quantities of rum, noting that without New England rum, a New England army could not be kept together. He calculated men were consuming a bottle a day. The spirit, while high in moments of patriotic fervor, is also prone to dissipation. Your arms are as varied as your comrades' costumes, mainly flintlock muskets and fowling pieces, some ancient. The average musket is heavy, about 10 pounds, but a good musketman can prime, load, fire, and reload 3 to 4 times a minute, a shot every 15 seconds. The problem is, many men accustomed to firearms since childhood use them any way they see fit, firing them off at wild geese or just for fun, wasting precious powder, which is in short supply across the colonies. Washington, newly in command, quickly discovered how desperate the situation was regarding powder, reportedly stunned into silence for half an hour when told there was less than 10,000 pounds on hand, enough for only about 9 rounds per man. Supplies come mainly by clandestine shipments from Europe, a precarious lifeline across 3,000 miles of ocean. Congratulations, you've endured the stench and the sickness of camp life. The good news? The enemy is bottled up in Boston. The bad news? You are too, in a way. Your army controls the land around Boston, but the British control the sea, supplying their troops and receiving reinforcements at will. The situation, as General George Washington notes, on January 14th, 1776, produces many an uneasy hour when all around me are wrapped in sleep. Few people know the predicament we are in. He's been in command for 6 months, since July 3rd, having taken over the sprawling, spontaneous New England army that gathered after Lexington and Concord, and the savage, fighting at Breed's Hill and Bunker Hill. Washington, a 43-year-old Virginian, a man of commanding presence, over 6 feet tall, well-proportioned, with reddish-brown hair and gray-blue eyes, carries himself with martial dignity. He's accustomed to respect, amiable and modest, but with a certain distance in manner. He had little prior military experience beyond backwoods warfare and the disastrous Braddock campaign, never having led an army in battle or directed a siege. Yet, Congress appointed him Commander-in-Chief of the Army of the United Colonies. He himself feels great distress, conscious his abilities may not be equal to the trust, but seeing the importance of the glorious cause, he accepts the momentous duty. He quickly sets about organizing the army, which still has no flag or uniforms. Officers are distinguished by ribbons or cockades, sergeants by red cloth on their shoulders. Washington chooses a light blue ribbon across his chest. He insists on discipline. New rules and regulations are read every morning after prayers. He reviews the defenses on horseback almost daily. Yet, despite the changes, the army remains largely composed of citizen soldiers, many unused to being told what to do every hour of the day, preferring to do as they please. This puzzles Washington, who struggles with a mounting contempt for what he sees as the unaccountable kind of stupidity in the lower class of these people and the officers who cater to them to get reelected. However, Washington finds a few remarkable men, untried but with ability. Nathaniel Greene, a 33-year-old Rhode Island foundryman, self-educated, good-natured, and a born leader who had never set foot on a battlefield before joining the army 6 months ago. Despite a stiff leg and occasional asthma, Greene proves tirelessly hard-working, applying himself every waking moment, often sleeping only a few hours a night. He quickly becomes an object of confidence for Washington, always in agreement on matters of consequence. Another is Colonel Henry Knox, a 25-year-old Boston bookseller, big, gregarious, and highly energetic, despite a fouling peace accident that destroyed 2 fingers on his left hand. Knox, like Greene, is self-educated, reading all he can on gunnery and tactics. Washington had decided the army at Boston was insufficient, and the king had dispatched reinforcements and 3 of his best major generals, William Howe, John Burgoyne, and Henry Clinton. Howe, a member of Parliament, had earlier said he would decline a command in America, but now duty called. He was convinced the insurgents were few compared to loyalists. War had come on April 19th at Lexington and Concord, then savagely on June 17th at Breed's Hill and Bunker Hill. Bunker Hill was proclaimed a British victory, but His Majesty's forces suffered over 1,000 casualties in an appalling slaughter before gaining the high ground. As acidly observed, a few more such victories would surely spell ruin for the victors. By summer's end, a British ship docked at Plymouth, bearing 170 sick and wounded officers and soldiers from Bunker Hill, all in great distress, some without legs or arms, clothes hanging on them like loose morning gowns. So much were they fallen away by sickness and want of nourishment. Near 60 women and children, widows of the slain, were on board, exhibiting a shocking spectacle. The vessel itself, though very large, was almost intolerable from the stench. The miseries of the troops still besieged at Boston, and the Loyalists who took refuge there, were also described in London papers. The scene: melancholy, disease, and death. The soldiers, almost lost for want of fresh provisions, like birds in a cage. On the afternoon of October 26, 1775, King George III rode in royal splendor to Parliament to address the increasingly distressing issue of war in America. In an age that adored ritual and pageantry, it was a scene hardly to be improved upon, with 60,000 people lining the route. The king, 37, hard-working, and duty-bound, believed America must be made to obey. He had no doubt the nation saw the conduct in America in its true light, and compelling obedience was necessary. In the House of Lords in March, Lord Sandwich, First Lord of the Admiralty, looked incredulous when challenged on winning the war. "Suppose the colonies do abound in men. What does that signify?" he asked. "They are raw, undisciplined, cowardly men." General James Grant boasted he could march from one end of the continent to the other with 5,000 British regulars, a widely quoted claim. By the crisp, sunny afternoon of October 26th, George III's popularity seemed higher than ever. He entered the House of Lords, flanked by peers, addressing Parliament on the desperate conspiracy and rebellion in America. He declared America in rebellion and confirmed he would commit land and sea forces, including unnamed foreign mercenaries, sufficient to end it. He denounced the leaders for seeking independence, something they had not yet openly declared. Parliament, Tory and Whig, denied the supremacy of Parliament in determining what was best for America. Even Edmund Burke referred repeatedly to our colonies. Despite heartfelt opposition speeches, calling for conciliation, warning of ruinous consequences, and questioning the hiring of foreign troops or shedding British blood, the votes in both houses overwhelmingly supported the king's stance, defeating the opposition by more than 2-1 in the Lords, and an even greater margin in the Commons. The debate in the Commons lasted until 4 in the morning. Congratulations, you've survived the political pronouncements and the looming threat of more war. The good news? Washington is making plans. The bad news? His first plan is to send 1,000 men into the wilderness of Maine to attack Quebec, a hastily conceived secret expedition based on too little knowledge of the terrain. His second plan is to end the waiting and strike at Boston, even if it means destroying the town, despite formidable British defenses and insufficient American artillery and gunpowder. He wants a speedy finish, convinced no danger is to be considered when put in competition with the magnitude of the cause. He convenes a council of war on September 11th, 1775, asking his generals whether they can make a successful attack on Boston by means of boats. 3 major generals and 4 brigadiers are present, including the only professional soldier, Major General Charles Lee, a former British officer with a sharp mind, a strange appearance, and a love for dogs. Lee, Washington's second in command, is self-assured, highly opinionated, moody, and ill-tempered. Boiling Water, his Indian name. He thinks Washington's appellation, Excellency, is absurd, but acknowledges Washington is the first officer in military knowledge and experience we have in the whole army. General Artemus Ward, a heavy-set Massachusetts farmer and storekeeper who had overall command before Washington, is present. Considered a good man, a thorough New England man, though uninspiring, fat, old church warden to Lee. The council discusses Washington's amphibious assault plan. They know winter is approaching, the troops lack barracks and firewood, and enlistments are expiring. Disbanding one army before assembling another could mean ruin. Gunpowder is short, but enough for an attack. They consider the hazard, the loss of men, and the consequences of failure. After discussion, they unanimously agree not to attack. Not for the present, at least. It is a sound decision. The hazard is too great. The chance of disastrous failure real. Men could be stranded on mudflats under fire. It could be another Bunker Hill slaughter. Washington accepts the decision, but continues work on flat-bottomed boats, and writes to John Hancock. He has not wholly laid it aside, sensing many in Congress are as impatient as he with the stalemate. By late November, re-enlistments are alarmingly few. Fewer than 1,000 of 10,000 men agree to stay. Washington advises Congress that some stimulus besides love of country, like paying troops in advance, is needed. His war chest is empty. The troops haven't been paid for weeks. Morale is low. He confides in Joseph Reed, his invaluable secretary, that his situation is truly alarming, and General Howe is well apprised. He feels a dearth of public spirit and want of virtue among the Yankee soldiers. A dirty, mercenary spirit pervades the whole. He writes he would never have accepted command had he foreseen his difficulties. Congratulations. Winter has come, but with it, opportunity. The good news? Colonel Henry Knox is on his way with cannon from Fort Ticonderoga. The bad news? The journey is brutal. His army is shrinking, and the British still seem to underestimate you. On November 21st, the first snow falls. Winter is here, with bitter winds. Distress is reportedly extreme in Boston. The British are cutting trees and tearing down houses for firewood. Supplying the besieged city by sea is difficult due to winter storms and American privateers. Food is short. Men are dying of scurvy. Smallpox rages. British deserters crossing the lines report the American army is tired, unpaid, lacks clothing, and longs for home. In mid-January, Washington writes one of his most forlorn letters to Reed, suffering sleepless nights, feeling few know the predicament they are in. He enumerates his troubles: little powder, no money, depleted arms supply because men going home took muskets, only half his paper army fit for duty. He believes his inability to attack Boston led to this pass and considers it miraculous the British are blind to his true state. He's downcast, wishing he'd taken his musket and entered the ranks, or retired to the back country and lived in a wigwam. He believes if he rises superior to these difficulties, it must be Providence blinding the enemy. Washington learns through undoubted intelligence the British are fitting out ships, likely for New York, a city of vast importance. Generals Lee and Greene are convinced New York is crucial. Loyalists are numerous there. Greene warns getting sentiment against them would be a fatal stab to the colony's union. He sees two choices: defend New York or burn it. Lee offers to go to New York to see about defenses. Washington, though agreeing time is of the essence, knows congressional approval is needed. Fortunately, John Adams, on leave from Congress, assures him New York is a kind of key to the whole continent, and no effort to secure it ought to be omitted, giving Washington full authority for action anywhere. On January 8th, Washington dispatches General Lee to New York to put the city in the best posture of defense. The bitter cold continues in Massachusetts. Washington tests the ice on Back Bay, hoping for an ice bridge for an attack. On February 16th, he convenes a council of war, urging a bold attempt on Boston, a vigorous attempt when practicable. Gates notes, "It's a major question." Putnam bewails the lack of powder. Greene, stricken with jaundice, writes his dread of the proposed attack. Horrible if it succeeded, still more horrible if it failed. The council says no to attacking Boston again. However, they agree to another plan: lure the enemy out to attack the Americans by fortifying Dorchester Heights. Howe had sworn he would sally forth if the Americans occupied Dorchester. Washington, crestfallen over not attacking Boston, thought too dangerous, gracefully concedes. Perhaps his irksomeness led him to propose more than warrant prudence. Now, there would be no holding back on Dorchester. Preparations are elaborate and mammoth. Fortifications are built elsewhere out of sight. Timber frames filled with screwed hay, or bundles of branches, fascines, barrels filled with earth, are ready to roll down slopes on the advancing enemy. To divert the enemy and drown out noise, night artillery barrages are planned from Roxbury, Cobble Hill, and Lechmere Point, where Knox's cannon from Ticonderoga are emplaced. The crossing of the Dorchester Causeway will be concealed by a barrier of hay bales. 3,000 men under General Thomas will fortify the heights. 4,000 more will stand by at Cambridge for an amphibious attack on Boston once the British assault on Dorchester begins. Howe is reported to intend to evacuate Boston at first chance, but this does not deter Washington. Congratulations, you've made history. The good news? The British are gone from Boston. The bad news? The war is far from over, and your army is headed to New York, where the challenges are immense. On the night of March 4th, 1776, the bombardment of Boston begins, British answering with a heavier cannonade. Abigail Adams, 10 miles away, writes her house shakes, and she can't sleep. Little damage is done, mostly noise, just as Washington wished. On the crucial third night, March 4th, the roar is furious. British Captain Charles Stewart describes sheets of fire, and inhabitants in horrid situation, women crying for protection. From American lines, Lieutenant Samuel Webb hears cries of poor women and children. At the first crash of guns, General Thomas and 2,000 men move rapidly and silently across the Dorchester Causeway, shielded by hay bales. Hundreds of carts and wagons loaded with chandeliers, fascines, hay bales, barrels, and guns from Ticonderoga follow. Dr. Thatcher notes the procession moves in solemn silence while cannon roar. Progress up the steep slopes is difficult. Ox teams and wagons make 3 and 4 trips. The night is unseasonably mild, perfectly beautiful with a full moon, ideal conditions for working, as if the hand of the Almighty were directing things, as Reverend William Gordon feels certain it was. By first faint light before dawn, everything is ready, at least 20 cannon in place. It is an utterly phenomenal achievement. At daybreak, British commanders looking up at the heights can scarcely believe their eyes. Howe exclaims, "These fellows have done more work in one night than his army could do in 3 months." The shock of discovery throws the British into utmost consternation. Their immediate cannonade proves useless. Their guns cannot elevate high enough. Admiral Shuldam sends an urgent message to Howe. No ship can remain in the harbor unless the rebels are removed. Howe must attack. He orders 2,000 troops to proceed by ship to Castle Island for an attack on Dorchester at nightfall. Captain Archibald Robertson thinks the plan little short of madness. The fate of the whole town, if not America, at stake. By nightfall, a storm rages, with hail mixed with snow and sleet. By midnight, the wind blows almost a hurricane. Windows are smashed, fences blown over. 2 British transports bound for Castle Island are blown ashore. American Lieutenant Isaac Bangs calls it the worst storm he ever exposed to. Clearly, no British assault will happen that night. The morning after, the storm continues, rain driving. General Heath concludes, "Kind heaven intervened." Howe calls off the attack and gives orders to prepare to evacuate Boston. Possibly it was the storm, but also Robertson's pleas and the influence of other officers, and John Montresor, who convinced Howe to evacuate. No one in Boston will forget the days that followed. In less than 48 hours, the town's security dissolves. Howe's army and fleet are in danger. They face the humiliation of ignominious retreat. Boston becomes a scene of utmost frenzy. Nothing but hurry and confusion, every person striving to get out. Loyalists are in utmost distress. Howe had received no orders from London since October. He has no long-standing plan for withdrawal. General Grant notes he was never in so thick a wood, but they must look forward and get out. Thousands of troops, military stores, women, and children must be transported, plus every loyalist who chooses to go. Food is scarce. Ships are delayed by storms. High winds churn the harbor. Rebel guns remain silent, but are visible on Dorchester Heights, steadily strengthening their position. On March 8th, town selectmen cross lines under a white flag, stating Howe has no intention of destroying the town unless the troops are molested. The word is passed, allowed to depart peacefully. The British would spare the town. The night of March 9th, when rebels move on Nook's Hill, Howe orders a thunderous all-night bombardment, but only 4 men are killed by a single ball. Men gather 700 cannonballs the next day. In town, the rush worsens. Hogsheads of sugar and salt, barrels of flour, even the commander's elegant coach are dumped into the harbor. Cannon are spiked or dumped. Americans watch confusion from hillsides. Washington convinced Howe is ready to sail for New York. The alarm and anxiety among loyalists is extreme. They must leave, but don't know where or if there's room. By March 10th, they are told to come aboard. There's no time to deliberate. Little can be taken. Those who earlier fled Cambridge or Roxbury know the experience. Now, Bostonians face forsaking homes, belongings, way of life. How orders inhabitants to give up linen and woolen goods for the enemy's use. Crean Brush, a loyalist, is assigned to carry it out. He and his men plunder the town. Gangs rampage, breaking open houses and shops. There never was such destruction and outrage committed any day before this. Brush makes off with over 2,000 pounds worth of goods from one wharf. Not until St. Patrick's Day, Sunday, March 17th, does the wind turn fair. At 4 in the morning, over 8,000 redcoats march through the dark streets. By 7, ships throng the wharves, lifting sail. By 9, all are underway. 120 ships depart with over 11,000 people, 906 troops, 667 women, 553 children, 100 loyalists. Americans watch from shore, cheering, weeping. Surely it is the Lord's doing. The whole fleet anchors at King's Road. Howe's flagship, Chatham, fires a roaring 21-gun salute. The Chatham's full 50 guns answering, an ear-splitting reminder of royal might. Congratulations, you've survived the siege of Boston. The good news? It was a pretty sharp skirmish and a victory. The bad news? You're headed to New York, a far greater challenge. The first cheers from American lines come at 9 that morning. Small boys run across the neck with news. British troops are still manning Bunker Hill fortifications. Hay dummies set up by fleeing redcoats. Early afternoon, the first troops from Roxbury march into Boston, drums beating, flags flying, led by Artemus Ward. Washington, in a characteristically gracious gesture, gave the honor to Ward, the thorough New England man, and his predecessor. He knows Ward was the first to favor a move on Dorchester Heights. Washington attends Sunday services, his chaplain choosing Exodus 14:25 as text, and they took off their chariot wheels, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. Washington rides into Boston, March 18th, surprised how much was not destroyed. The town suffered greatly, but Hancock's mansion is fine, occupied by General James Grant, who wanted to lay waste to every town. The last desperate efforts are evident. Spiked cannon, shattered wagons, scuttled ships, smallpox still lurking. An inventory lists immense quantities of abandoned British goods, far more than expected. The siege was a stunning success. Washington bested Howe, despite insufficient resources and inexperienced officers. He had been saved repeatedly by his council from attacking Boston, but accepted their judgment without ill temper. He kept his head, health, and strength, bearing up under immense weight. Having struggled with his dislike of New Englanders, he chose untried Yankees like Greene and Knox, who proved able and loyal, saving the day. Washington never again speaks ill of New Englanders, because they are New Englanders. He has no illusions about what lies ahead. The humiliation the British suffered could make them a more formidable foe. Washington senses great political change is in the offing, attributed partly to common sense. Paine's pamphlet argues, the sun never shined on a cause of greater worth, pleading for separation. The King's speech in October, with charges of traitorous rebellion and foreign assistance, ends any hope of reconciliation. Washington himself feels determined to shake off all connections with Britain, not under covert, but in words clear as the sun. At Cambridge headquarters, Washington declares a new army, entirely continental, commencing New Year's Day, 1776. He raises a new flag, 13 red and white stripes with British colors in the corner. The British in Boston mistake it for a flag of surrender. Congratulations! You've made it through the winter, and the British are gone from Boston. The good news? You're on the move, heading for New York. The bad news? The journey is rough, the roads are terrible, and the enemy fleet is massive. For 2 weeks, the army marches through the untroubled countryside of New England, columns winding, showing the first faint signs of spring. Citizenry turn out to cheer, offer food and drink. Large armies are an unfamiliar sight. Hurry is the order of the day. Washington is in extreme hurry to reach New York. Nathaniel Greene and his artillery are to move as speedily as possible. Marching is tiring, but spirits are greatly improved by being on the move and the warm reception. Joseph Hodgkins, the Ipswich cobbler, finds New York exceeds all places he's seen, but the living is excessive dear. Lieutenant Isaac Bangs, a Massachusetts soldier, finds the level of piety alarmingly low in New York, worrying what consequences this will have for the cause. He attends services of different denominations, likes the Dutch church best, preferring the priest's piety to the English church's pomp, though he understands no Dutch. He investigates the city's darker side, the Holy Ground, a slum and brothel district, finding immense, brutal gratification easily indulged in, worrying the army will be debauched. Washington arrives in New York, April 13th, takes headquarters at the Kennedy Mansion, number 1 Broadway. He finds defenses only about half done. Crowding the streets, the army seems an overwhelming multitude, only half fit for duty. He worries exceedingly over disease and dissipations. New York is unlike Boston, bounded by navigable rivers, a harbor accommodating the largest fleet. Whoever commands the sea must command the town, General Lee noted earlier, a situation that puzzles him. Washington, however, expresses no misgivings, convinced he can defend the city, of vast importance for controlling the Hudson Corridor. His decision is based more on political judgment, sensing Congress and patriots expect every effort to hold the city. Loyalist sentiment is widespread in New York. 2/3 of property belongs to Tories. The royal governor, William Tryon, on board a ship in the harbor, is believed to be directing Loyalist operations secretly. Washington, denied reliable intelligence at Boston, now finds the situation reversed. British warships are a formidable presence, only withdrawing slightly in April. The threat of conspiracy, sabotage, organized resistance is real. Washington, though struggling with New Englanders at Boston, here finds men from different colonies, compounding animosity and discord, fearing it could tear the army apart. He writes, "They have nothing but providence and unanimity to depend upon." Discipline is hardly improved among new troops. Many raw recruits like aged gentlemen. Congratulations, you've reached New York, but the threat is closing in. The good news? Independence is declared. The bad news? The British fleet, the largest ever seen in American waters, is massing in the harbor. On June 29th, officers with telescopes on the roof of Washington's headquarters see signals flying from Staten Island hills. The first British fleet ships appear. Within hours, 45 ships drop anchor inside Sandy Hook. Their masts look like a forest of trimmed pine trees. Henry and Lucy Knox are at breakfast at number 1 Broadway when they see the fleet. Lucy is in abject terror. Knox writes to his brother of her distress. The city in an uproar, troops repairing to posts. He scolds her for not having gone before. By sunset, over 100 enemy ships anchor in the bay. Riders gallop off to Connecticut and New Jersey. Martha Washington says goodbyes to her husband and departs New York with speed, as do Lucy Knox and Katie Green with their children. Knox writes to Lucy, valuing her safety above all else, reminding her they fight for their country, for posterity, and on this campaign, happiness or misery of millions may depend. More enemy ships arrive. Centurion, Chatham, 50 guns each. Phoenix, 40. Greyhound, 30. Asia, 64. Their combined firepower exceeds American guns. Total fleet over 120 ships. 10,000 troops received at Halifax. Scotch Brigade joined. An additional 15,000, 20,000 expected hourly from England under Admiral Lord Howe. New York is in commotion, packing up and getting away. On July 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress in Philadelphia votes to dissolve the connection with Great Britain. News reaches New York. July 6th, spontaneous celebrations erupt. Officers go to a public house to testify their joy. A letter from John Hancock with the Declaration arrives July 8th. Many, like Henry Knox, see the war has entered a new stage. By renouncing allegiance, delegates committed treason. Adams calls it the most complete, unexpected, and remarkable revolution in history. On July 9th, at 6 in the evening, Washington orders brigades onto commons and parade grounds to hear Declaration read aloud. The general hopes this event serves as fresh incentive, knowing peace and safety depend on the Army's success. Not since spring 1775 had spirits been so high, but the exuberance is quickly dashed. On July 12th, in a surprise move, British ships Phoenix and Rose, with tenders, cast off moorings at Staten Island and sail up the Hudson, demonstrating how indefensible New York is without sea power. Alarm guns sound. Soldiers rush through streets crowded with panic-stricken people. Cannon at Fort George and shore batteries open fire. Cannonballs slam into houses. Washington feels extreme distress at shrieks and cries of women and children running, seeing his men gawking helplessly, so awestruck or terrified by the barrage. Private Joseph Martin, 15, remembers enjoying the complete view, thinking the sound musical. American gun crews fire nearly 200 shots to no apparent effect. 6 American artillerymen are killed when their cannon blows up. The only fatalities due to inexperience, overconfidence, or drunkenness. British ships proceed upriver, anchoring 30 miles above the city, cutting off rebel supplies and rousing loyalists. In ensuing orders, Washington can barely conceal disgust at inexcusable behavior, shame over officers gawking like bumpkins. It gives the enemy a mean opinion of the army. Knox writes, "The loss of 6 men was great misfortune, but Hope's day's action taught the rest to be less impetuous. A larger, more ominous lesson. If 2 ships can pass so readily, so can an entire fleet, cutting off escape. Congratulations, you've witnessed the birth of a nation and the start of something much darker. The good news? Your resilience is tested. The bad news? The British are massing, and a crushing defeat is coming. On August 12th, sea beyond Narrows fills with another 100 ships or more bearing down on New York. A fleet so large, it takes all day to come up harbor under full canvas, colors flying, guns saluting, sailors and soldiers cheering. Another 3,000 British troops and over 8,000 Hessians arrive after arduous 3 months at sea. Total British Armada, nearly 400 ships, 73 warships. Largest fleet ever seen in American waters. Largest expeditionary force of 18th century, over 32,000 troops, landing on Staten Island. Nothing like it ever seen in New York. Housetops covered with gazers, wharves jammed. To Americans, they are colossal. Joseph Reed writes to his wife, astonished a people would come 3,000 miles at such risk and expense to rob, plunder, destroy another people, because they won't lay lives and fortunes at their feet. On Staten Island, redcoats in tent encampments are in holiday spirits. On American side, veterans of Boston campaign like Jabez Fitch and Joseph Hodgkins have no doubt troops will give a good account. Confidence bolstered by distorted notions of own strength. The enemy is coming in almost every day, perhaps 25,000. One paper says American Army numbers 70,000. New arrivals look like soldiers, in smart uniforms, well-armed, marching into town full of pride. Delaware Blues, 800 men, in handsome blue coats, white waistcoats, buckskin breeches, white woolen stockings, fine English muskets. Maryland Battalion, men of honor, family, fortune, better armed, dazzling in scarlet, lined with buff. John Glover's Marblehead fishermen wear blue jackets of sailors. Deserters are increasing. New recruits difficult due to bumper harvest. Complaints are without number. Some leaving to take up hay, grass, hoe corn. Others with families sick. Wickedness prevails very much in camp. Lieutenant Joseph Hodgkins learns of his small son's death at home. Heavy news. Camp fever epidemic in summer heat. Vile water here sickens us all. Men die of dysentery, putrid disorders. Many sick won't go to hospital. Cleanliness insisted upon, vaults covered daily, new dug weekly. But infectious filth is the killer, caused by disease. It's thought anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 men are sick. Washington's men daily diminishing. English visitor, they desert in large bodies, are sickly, filthy, divided, unruly. Putrid disorders, smallpox carried off great numbers, 6,000 in hospitals. General Heath estimates 10,000 ill. Those not taken down live with dread. These things are melancholy, but they are nevertheless true. Washington hopes for better. Washington's quandary. Where will British strike? How to apportion strength? He feels compelled to divide army, violating old rule of battle. Never divide force, facing superior enemy. Splits army roughly equally, relying on ability to move men over East River. He worries landing on Long Island is a diversion for full assault on New York. Greene stresses concern. New troops on Long Island, strangers to the ground, are undisciplined, inexperienced, poorly armed, poorly equipped, won't support each other. Ground is crucial. Congratulations. You're about to face the largest battle of the war, and it's not going well. The good news? Some of your officers fight valiantly. The bad news? You are completely outmaneuvered and suffer a crushing defeat. On August 27th, 1776, the Battle of Brooklyn, or Long Island, begins. British land on Long Island. By noon, 15,000 men and 40 artillery pieces landed, smoothly assembled. Cornwallis presses inland. Loyalist welcome is effusive. British sailors regale themselves with apples. Hessian officer describes burned houses, fields in ashes, roads lined with dead cattle, old people looking sadly at what was a paradise. To invaders, American affluence shows they grew rich at Britain's expense. Word reaches New York early, but Washington misinformed about size of enemy force. 9,000. He concludes, landing is faint, dispatches only 1,500 more troops to Brooklyn. Total there, less than 6,000. Expectation of larger strike at New York or up Hudson persists. Jabez Fitch's regiment marches to Brooklyn, told to halt and wait. Many reports, various sizes of enemy force within 4 miles. Fitch and men know not what to believe. Colonel Moses Little reports enemy within 3 miles, sends his will to his son. Washington's general orders, August 23rd, confirm British ashore on Long Island, leaving no doubt of seriousness of moment. Appeals to pride, patriotism, love of liberty. The hour is fast approaching on which the honor and success of this army and the safety of our bleeding country depend. Remember, you are free men, fighting for blessings of liberty, that slavery will be your portion if you don't acquit yourselves like men. Remember how your courage has been despised by cruel invaders. Washington, beset by second thoughts, reshuffles command at Brooklyn August 24th, putting Israel Putnam over Sullivan. Poor choice. Putnam lacks experience, temperament. Putnam and 6 battalions cross to Brooklyn next day, causing stir. Washington outraged at disorder, unsoldier-like state of troops at Brooklyn, lectures. Putnam, distinction between regulated army and mob is discipline. Howe's troops perfectly orchestrated landing. The night of August 21st, a terrifying storm over New York. Like a hurricane, most terrible storm. Lightning falls in masses, seems to strike incessantly. Houses burst into flame. 10 soldiers killed by single flash. 3 officers killed by single thunderbolt. Tips of swords, coins melted, bodies black. To Major Benedict, battle bloodshed is expected, but hidden meaning when bolt is launched by invisible arm. Before dawn, August 22nd, sky clear, cloudless. Fresh breeze, roll of drums, British invasion of Long Island underway. Frigates, bomb catches swing loose, stand down narrows to cover landing. At 5 o'clock, Advance Corps, 4,000 elite troops, pushes off, packed aboard flatboats. Slowly but steadily, invasion force proceeds across 3 miles of water. At 8 o'clock, at flash of signal gun, all 4,000 ashore on flat, empty beach. Everything carefully prepared, smoothly coordinated. No opposition. Pennsylvania riflemen withdrawn, driving off or killing cattle, burning wheat fields, smoke rising, seen in New York. More troops follow, naval spectacle of over 90 vessels filling narrows, wave after wave, redcoats, bayonets gleaming, Hessian grenadiers ferried over standing. By noon, fully equipped army of 15,000 men, 40 artillery pieces landed, rapidly assembled. More will follow, including women. At 3 in the morning, August 27th, General Putnam awakened, told enemy attacking on right near Narrows, Gowanus Road. British Commander Grant occupies attention on right with 300 troops, muskets roaring. Americans flee. Putnam rushes Sterling's camp to order him to meet enemy. Repulse them. Alarm guns sound. Drums roll. Troops fall out. General Samuel Parsons, like Putnam resting at headquarters, rides off, arrives first on scene, finds enemy through wood, descending hill, with 20 fugitive guards, takes post on height, halts enemy column, gives Sterling time. Sterling's forces, 1,600 men, include Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Delaware battalions, James Smallwood and John Haslett, commanders, absent on court-martial duty. Redcoats advance in regular order, colors flying, artillery in front. Sterling draws lines, offers battle in true English taste. British march to within 200 yards, open fire. Americans stand it well, no disposition to shrink. Hold fire until 50 yards. British decline to come nearer. Americans gave them a fair fire. Every man leveled well. Enoch Anderson saw man tumble from horse, aimed, knows not if he killed. Fire returned, killed 2 Americans. Americans retreat 400 yards, joined by Attlee's regiment. Twice British assault Parsons' troops on height. Twice American lines hold. Sterling's men under cannon bombardment. American cannon answer. Troops unflinch. In first hours of open battle, Continental Army fights valiantly, believing they hold own against regulars. Sterling reminds them Grant boasted conquering America with 5,000. Grant presses advantage only so much, holding back. Had a skirmishing and a cannonade for some hours, which drew their whole attention. At center, Hessian artillery bombarding Sullivan's lines. General von Heister's brigades, drawn up on plain, show no sign of moving. Sullivan rides out from Brooklyn, takes command at Flatbush Pass, sees Hessians not moving, Sterling in trouble, sends regiments. At 9 o'clock, Howe's signal guns crash. Suddenly, Sullivan realizes whole British army coming from behind, surrounded. On plain beyond ridge, von Heister orders Hessians in motion, drums rolling. Sullivan pulls back main force, swings around to face oncoming British. Vastly outnumbered, Americans return fire with murderous effect. Officers on both sides fear men cut to pieces. Americans and British often have no idea what's happening. Americans, not only ones running. British light infantry officer, leading 30 men into thick American riflemen, sees 1/3 of his men fall. Breaks for woods. More rebels spring up. Fire from every direction. I called to my men to run to the first wall. Ran across a field, exposed to the fire of 300 men. Literally run out in midst, calling to surrender. Stopped. Saw riflemen thick. None of own men. Made for wall, threw self headlong. In turmoil, Sullivan struggles to hold control, keep men from panicking. Situation desperate. Retreat, only alternative. Stages of fight and flight. He leads them rapidly toward Brooklyn lines, those left to hold ridge overrun by Hessians. Jaegers and grenadiers, with bayonets, move through steep woods. Terrible hills suddenly appear. Americans only get shot or 2 off. Some fight back, wielding muskets like clubs, run through with bayonets. Some plead for mercy. Fear of the Hessian troops was indescribable. Surrendered, begged on knees. Those who get away flee back down through trees, run headlong into hail of British fire. Left side of American line collapses. Thousands run, hundreds captured. Sullivan holds back, trying to see many to safety. Amazingly, most succeed. Sullivan captured. American soldier Lewis Morris barely escaped. Right Sullivan surrounded, pistol in each hand, going directly between enemy lines. Joseph Hodgkins runs pell-mell into marshes, fired on, knows hardly who killed or drowned. Sterling, surrounded, determined not to surrender sword, breaks through fire to Hessian regiment, gives himself to von Heister. By noon, rout over. British, advanced so rapidly, want to keep going, carry attack to Brooklyn Works. Many British officers feel no time to stop, but Howe orders halt. In original plan, Clinton said principal attacks shouldn't be pushed too far. Exception flanking attack should be pushed. Clinton later writes little inclination to check ardor, seeing enemy flying in panic. Howe recalls mood of men, required repeated orders to desist. It was first great battle of Revolution, largest until then. Over 40,000 men involved. Field ranged 6 miles, fighting over 6 hours. For Continental Army, first test under fire, crushing defeat. "Oh, doleful, doleful, doleful," scrawled Chaplain Philip Fithian. To British, "Glorious day, cheap and complete victory." Grant had the field day I talked of. If a good bleeding can bring those Bible-faced Yankees to their senses, the fever of independency should soon abate. Everything had gone like clockwork. Clinton's plan succeeded beyond expectations. Percy, our men behaved themselves like British troops fighting in a good cause. In opinion of Sir James Murray, no soldiers ever behaved with greater spirit. In one thing only failed, couldn't run as fast as foes. Many ready to run over each other. Howe reports losses under 400, 59 killed, 267 wounded, 31 missing. Hessians lost 5 killed, 26 wounded. Rebel losses over 3,000, Howe claimed. Over 1,000 prisoners, 2,000 killed, wounded, drowned. Disparity of losses exaggerated. Washington later estimates 701,000 killed, captured. General Parsons avoided capture, collected American dead, amounted to 60 with enemy dead, heap. Judged American killed, inconsiderable. Some officers in thick of fight convinced British suffered more killed, but British took most prisoners. Few Americans admit severe defeat. Actual losses, dreadful. 300 killed, over 1,000 captured, 3 generals, Sullivan, Sterling, Woodhull. Sullivan and Sterling treated courteously, dined with Lord Howe on Eagle. Woodhull died of wounds weeks later. Among prisoners, Captain Samuel Attlee, Lieutenant Jabez Fitch. Attlee subjected to most scurrilous and abusive language, asked why they weren't bayoneted. Jabez Fitch fought through day, surrendered when surrounded, confined with prisoners in barn, comforted friend, Captain John Jewett, bayoneted twice in excruciating pain. Jewett made Fitch promise to describe death to wife, died from bayonet, after he was taken prisoner and stripped. Accounts of bayoneting Americans common. Stories of Hessians pinning Americans to trees. Letter by unnamed British officer in Massachusetts. Spy describes readily surrendered Americans dispatched. Hessians and Highlanders gave no quarters. Letter read, "Fine thing to see with alacrity, they dispatched the rebels with bayonets. Stratagems lawful in war, especially against such vile enemies. Numbers of individual Americans beaten after surrendering. No mass atrocities committed. Letter and spy, likely propaganda. Account of Hessians burying 500 bodies in pit untrue. Some prisoners, including Fitch, recorded civility from captors. Infamous Grant was so good as to make us a present of a side of mutton. British Hessian captors find prisoners' curiosities. Could not have been taken as soldiers, only torn blouses. Astonished how badly clothed Americans. Most have nothing but a wretched farmer's costume. Officers, no better dressed, only ordinary manual laborers. Lieutenant von Bardeleben wrote in code some officers shed their ideas of being heroes. The prisoners who knelt and sought to surrender were beaten. Still worse treatment in store for most prisoners confined, starved in jails, church crypts, vile British prison ships. In remaining hours after guns silent, Americans in Brooklyn defenses wait tensely for British attack. Pitiful cries from wounded on battlefield. Stragglers come into lines, bedraggled, wounded. Mordecai Gist and 9 others cross into camps next morning, only ones of Marylanders to make it back. Congratulations, you've survived a crushing defeat and a desperate night retreat. The good news? 9,000 men, Equipment and horses escaped without loss of life. The bad news? Your army is battered, dispirited, and shrinking, and the enemy is still on the move. Morning of August 28th. Situation critical at Brooklyn. Outsmarted, outfought, hemmed in, backs to East River. Change in wind could make escape impossible. Brooklyn, a trap. Yet Washington orders more army from New York. Pennsylvania regiments, Glover's mass troops, 200 men. March into Brooklyn entrenchments with show. Pennsylvania officer Graydon notes, faces saddened by disaster, assume gleam of animation on approach. Murmur, these were the lads that might do something. Thomas Mifflin, handsome, self-assured, 32, Brigadier General of Fresh Pen Brigades, volunteers to survey defenses. Joseph Hodgkins, exhausted, writes home, in one piece, through the goodness of God. Expects action. Enemy within 1.5 miles. Weather changes dramatically. Temperature drops 10 degrees. Cold, drenching downpour. Start of northeastern storm. Riflemen ordered to keep up fire. British fire back. Rain falls with uncommon torrent. Guns wetted. Firing goes till evening. Storm and roar of guns continue into night. Across river, Pastor Shoekirk writes of boom of cannon intermixed with lightning. August 29th. Storm continues. Heavy rains fall. Troops without tents have little food. Fires hard to keep going. Private Martin gets by with biscuits, hard enough to break teeth of a rat. Hungry, soaked to skin, trenches filled with water, muskets, cartridges wet. Soldiers fall asleep standing or sitting. Washington, little sleep, sends incoherent report to Congress. People distressed. Defeat, engagement. British advancing by approaches, digging trenches. Storm is to Washington's advantage. Ill wind from northeast is stroke of good fortune. Howe's ships no chance to get up. But for how long? Old sunk ships, no serious barrier. Smaller ships can come up East River. Situation grim, but Washington, making rounds on horseback in rain, shows calm presence, tells men, cool but determined, demonstrates what he meant by example, anger, torment, despair kept to himself. Since April in New York, policy, keep close watch, decide according to circumstances. Sometime before noon, Mifflin reports British progress with approaches. Washington makes momentous decision. Secret, deceiving urgent message to General Heath at King's Bridge. All flatboats, sloops to be rounded up without delay. Pretext. New Jersey battalions coming to relieve others. Signed by Mifflin, Washington emphasizes no ceremony in carrying out order. Confiscate boats. At 4 in afternoon, still raining, Washington calls, meeting with generals at Livingston Mansion. Mifflin advised Washington must either fight or retreat, asks to propose retreat. Understanding. He and Penn Regiment serve as rear guard in outermost defenses, hold line while army departs. Most dangerous assignment. He insists it be his, lest proposing retreat harm reputation. Words of minutes. Submitted. Whether eligible to leave Long Island and remove army to New York. Unanimous decision. Only General John Moran Scott expresses doubts, aversion to giving up ground. Orders come at 7. Troops under arms with packs. Everything. Night attack on enemy, they are told. Graydon, with Penn regiments, thinks it desperate, almost suicidal. Several non-cooperative wills were made. Graydon concentrates on summoning courage. 9 o'clock. Troops with least experience, sick, wounded. Start for Brooklyn ferry landing. Pretext, relieved by reinforcements. Soldiers nearer front lines know nothing. thing was conducted with so much secrecy. Neither subalterns nor privates knew whole army crossing back to New York. Officers not told. Graydon thinks order for attack, extreme rashness. More, he thinks, more puzzled, until it flashed upon my mind that a retreat was the object. Order for assailing enemy a cover. Fellow officers dared not suffer themselves to believe it. Others think night escape, true intent. Weigh risks. Major Benjamin Talmadge thinks it formidable obstacle to move large body across mile-wide river with rapid current. Enemy, victorious, disciplined, numerous, fleet-stopping navigation. Rain stops, northeast wind keeps blowing, proving deterrent to American retreat. First troops at ferry find river rough, no boats can cross. Stand and wait. General McDougal, in charge of embarkation, sends message. No retreat tonight, with conditions. About 11 o'clock, wind dies down, shifts to southwest. Small armada of boats, manned by Glover's Mass, sailors, fishermen, starts over river from New York. Glover crossing to give directions. Glover's men, crucial, extraordinary seamanship, negotiate. Swift, contrary currents in loaded boats. Water inches below gunwales. In pitch dark, no running lights. Few had so much riding on skill. Boats work back and forth. More troops ordered to withdraw from lines. Tedious was the operation through mud and mire. Wagon wheels muffled with rags. Talking forbidden. Strictly enjoined not to speak or even cough. Move like specters. One regiment leaves station. Remaining troops fill vacancies. Graydon. Third night without sleep for many. Washington rides to Ferry Landing, takes charge. Orderly withdrawal of army considered most difficult maneuver. Ragtag amateur army, making night withdrawal in perfect order. Silence seems more than hoped for. Worst fear, British discover, descend with superior force. Troops in Mifflin's vanguard still holding outer defenses, knowing chance of annihilation if enemy wiser. Event of British attack. Fall back. Rally at Old Dutch Church. Hours pass. Sound of British picks. Shovels digging. Garrison at Fort Sterling. Ordered to stay through night as cover. About 2 in morning. Cannon goes off. No explanation. Graydon speculates. Gun discharged. Spiking it. Rest of life, Graydon remembers scene in Shakespeare's Henry V, long night wait before Agincourt, similar interval of dread suspense. Approximately 4 o'clock, still dark, young officer Major Alexander Scammell rides through outer defenses, looking for Mifflin. Scammell, 29, Harvard graduate, attorney, aide-de-camp to Sullivan. Tells Mifflin boats ready, Washington waiting for remaining troops. Mifflin mistaken. Scammell insists. Ridden from extreme left, ordered troops to march for ferry. Mifflin orders, hand, to form. Regiment, move out. Scammell mistaken. Blunder could spell disaster. Troops leave trenches, start for river. Without delay, halt near Dutch Church. Washington, astride horse, demands to know. Hand explaining when Mifflin rides up. Faces hard to see. Hand remembers Washington exclaiming, "Good God, General Mifflin, I am afraid you have ruined us." Mifflin responds with some warmth, obeying Washington's orders by Scammell. Washington, dreadful mistake, come too soon. Much confusion at the ferry, must turn back to posts. Weary troops held lines, counted hours till relief, waited in dark. Moment of extreme difficulty, trying business to young soldiers. Graydon, Whoever has seen troops in a similar situation knows how to appreciate the conduct of these brave men. Returned to lines, had the good fortune to recover our stations without the enemy perceiving what was going forward. At ferry landing, troops, supplies, artillery loaded aboard boats. Everyone worked furiously. Connecticut soldier remembers making 11 crossings. Exodus not moving fast enough. Some heavy cannon mired in mud left behind. Time running out. Nearly morning, large part of army still waiting. Without night curtain, escape doomed. Incredibly, circumstances intervene. Just at daybreak, heavy fog settles over Brooklyn, concealing everything. Fog so thick, soldier could scarcely discern man at 6 yards. Even with sunup, fog dense. Over on New York side, no fog. At long last, Mifflin, rear guard, troops at Fort Sterling summoned. Supposed we did not linger. Major Tallmadge, with regiment among last, thinks he saw Washington on ferry stairs staying to end. Graydon estimates 7 in morning, perhaps later, landed in New York. In less than hour after, fog disperses, enemy visible on shore left behind. In single night, 9,000 troops escaped across river. Not a life lost, only 3 men captured, hung back to plunder. Congratulations, you've escaped the trap at Brooklyn. The good news? You survived. The bad news? You were outsmarted, outfought, and suffered heavy losses, and the enemy is still pursuing. Friday, August 30th. Morning, to British astonishment, rebels evacuated all works on Brooklyn without shot fired. Neither could shipping get up for want of wind, and Hull escaped. Immediate British reaction, utter astonishment. Rebel army vanished under noses. Surprise no less than at Boston. Difference, relief, not dread. Brooklyn, and defenses theirs for taking, rebels on the run, cannot yet account for their precipitate retreat. Grant fails to understand why Americans abandoned massive fortifications so readily. General Howe performed admirably, deserved success. Lesson of Brooklyn. Pushed, Americans won't face King's troops again. Percy. Feel severely the blow of the 27th. Think rebels never stand before them in field. Everything seems over. Campaign will put total end to war. Predicts business pretty near over. Clinton, proud of role, writes sister expects to be home by Christmas. Many officers come to see rebel works, enjoy view from Fort Sterling. Most beautiful and fertile spot, yet seen in America, disturbed only by reek of unburied dead. Rebels, flight, behaved very ill as men. Some, including Grant, saw Americans made daring, superbly executed move. Wisely, gotten out when they did. Very ably effected retreat. Charles Stedman calls retreat particularly glorious. Saw peril of change in wind. Phoenix rose up East River, would cut escape. Retreat commended. Washington's leadership during retreat. Good luck played large part. Wars not won by withdrawals. Successful evacuation cannot compensate for losses. 1,000 plus prisoners, dead, wounded. Battle of Brooklyn, a fiasco. Washington, indecisive, inept. First command on large field, he and officers failed. Made to look like fools. From moment he took command in New York, Washington put himself in impossible position. Failed to recognize whoever commands sea must command town. Ignored warning. Dividing army, counted on ability to respond to circumstances, moving forces across East River, on eve of British attack, still baffled over whether it was real thing, what to do. British everything went as planned, landing to battle. Washington, almost nothing went as planned. Assumption of frontal assault, heart of American strategy, wishful thinking. outmaneuvered, battle over before it began, forgot happening on land, anguished over being outflanked by water. How could man insistent on things done so, McCullough writes, care so little about details? Jamaica Pass, unguarded, impossible to explain, spent day at Brooklyn studying situation. Washington never accounted for his part. For many, escape proof of ability, ease humiliation. Americans, rightly claim vastly outnumbered, showed courage, tenacity. General Putnam blamed for not ordering Sterling to withdraw sooner. Sullivan blamed for knowing too little terrain. Both faulted for leaving Jamaica Pass unattended. Colonel Samuel Miles, supposed in charge of left flank, had hunch enemy would use Jamaica Pass, did nothing. Sterling, for all bravery, criticized for fighting on open field. Many, including Henry Knox, insist Nathaniel Greene, familiar with details of Gowan Heights, would have met stiff opposition at Jamaica Pass, things gone differently. Possibly. Greene's illness, absence, one of Washington's severest blows. Washington largely blames Sullivan for little vigilance at Jamaica Pass, implying Greene wouldn't allow surprise. But British victory, certain all day. Struggle lasted longer, cost greater, but outnumbered. Without control of sea, Army never had chance. Howe's decision not to continue attack, afternoon subject of speculation. Severest critics, Captain John Montresor, morning of August 30th, first to discover Americans vanished. No question, Howe should have pressed attack, failed grievous mistake. Never pursues his victories, Montresor's assessment. Clinton feels with Americans flying in panic. Howe had chance to end war. Clinton wouldn't say so when questioned. Judged it prudent to hold back. Cornwallis in Parliament refuses to say Brooklyn lines taken by immediate attack. Americans wanted another Bunker Hill. Howe, remembering cost, no desire to squander lives on frontal attack. Lines hours at cheap rate by regular approaches. Couldn't risk loss sustained in assault. Had Howe pressed on August 27th, British victory total. Or had wind turned earlier, British Navy into East River. War and chances of independence, long delayed, even ended. When news of battle, Howe's exaggerated losses reached London. Sensation. Victory grand. Fully controverted opponents' predictions. Burke, Fox, others in Parliament downcast. Tories jubilant. News to enliven our countenances. Gibbon, Britain in ecstasy. Friend to Clinton. Bells rung, windows lighted. King pauses during stroll, expresses great satisfaction. In Congress, defeat spoken of privately. Unfortunate beginning, disaster. No panic. Country reports. Tory news. Anxiety, not panic. All in solicitude. Styles. Tories rejoicing. Sons of Liberty dejected. Newspapers emphasize Washington's daring retreat. Renewed confidence. Escape. Masterpiece. Manner reflects highest credit upon our commander-in-chief. One writer, Providence favored us. Another in Massachusetts. Spy. Defeat. Distress. Loud-speaking testimonies of the displeasure and anger of Almighty God against a sinful people. We have thought God was for us, had given many and signal instances, and had greatly frowned upon and disappointed our enemies. And verily, it has been so. But have we repented? In New York, gloom of defeat heavy. High spirits counted on for long compensate for enemy advantages. Gone. Army crossed night from Brooklyn, August 30th. Sorry sight. Filthy, bedraggled, numb, soaked, sick, emaciated. Army gone cheering no more. Surprising change, Pastor Schukirk notes. Merry tones on drums, fifes ceased. General damp spread. Scattered people up down streets moving. Swiftly, overwhelmingly defeated. Hard day for us poor Yankees. Enoch Anderson summing up. Resounding victory not decisive. War not ended. Washington 9,000 troops survived to fight another day. Congratulations, you've escaped again. But lost a crucial fort. The good news? You gained a brilliant new advisor. The bad news? Disobedience, desertion, and disease plague the army. For first 24 hours in New York after escape, nearly all collapsed in sleep, including Commander-in-Chief. Not till Saturday, August 31st, Washington notifies Congress, entirely unfit to take pen in hand. Since Monday, scarce any out of lines, 48 hours, proceeding, hardly off horse, never closed eyes, much hurried in arranging new dispositions. Will save extremity of concern for another letter. American soldiers deserting as if leaving sinking ship, 30-40 a time. Many defecting to enemy. Disobedience and theft epidemic. Far from army of heroes. Spirit of desertion, cowardice, plunder prevailed. Joseph Reed demoralized. Verge of quitting. Experience on battlefield. September 16th, Searing. Reed saw soldier running from enemy, ordered him back. Soldier raised musket, pulled trigger, lock snapped. Reed grabbed another gun, pulled trigger, it snapped. Drew sword, struck twice, wounded Leffingwell, severed thumb, forced surrender. Should have shot him. Could I have got my gun off? Leffingwell confessed running, found guilty of cowardice, sentenced to execution. At Reed's urging, Washington pardons him at last moment after kneeling to be shot. Next offender, suffer death without mercy. Attempt to introduce discipline must always be work of difficulty, Reed writes wife. Where democracy universally prevails, great equality, leveling spirit, discipline, hard to establish. A tempter becomes odious. Washington no less commanding, except raging outburst at Kips Bay, seems imperturbable, entirely in control, discouraged, unhappy, keeps up appearances. Unless some speedy, effectual measures adopted by Congress, our cause will be lost, tells John Hancock. War no work of a day must be carried on systematically. Good officers mandatory, only means to obtain them is establish permanent footing. End short-term enlistments. Officers better paid, better trained. Soldiers offered bounty, clothing, blankets, free land. Dependence on militia, assuredly resting upon a broken staff. Men dragged from tender scenes, unaccustomed to din of arms, unacquainted with military skill. Want of confidence facing trained troops makes them timid. Lust after plunder. Regimental surgeons taking bribes to certify sickness. Fear in Congress. People of standing army remote. No standing army. Cause faced ruin. Wants rules, regulations adopted. Punishments severe. Most atrocious offenses, maximum 39 lashes, seldom laid on, more sport. Punishment, many willing to undergo for bottle of rum. Washington unaware, Congress acted on much he wanted due to John Adams. Enlistment for duration gets 2,100 acres. New articles of war based on British. Stiffer punishments, up to 100 lashes. Death penalty for more crimes. Adams proposed military academy. Nothing came of it. Washington writes to Lund, Washington, September 30th, more candid about miseries. Such is my situation. If I were to wish the bitterest curse to an enemy, I should put him in my stead. Wearied to death with problems. One regiment, under 50 men, another 14 fit. In confidence, I tell you that I never was in such an unhappy, divided state since I was born. Enemy, within stone's throw, turns to Mount Vernon fireplaces. once whole, executed in masterly manner, exactly answerable, uniform, if not with army, at least at home. Crystal days, late September, early October in New York, lucent skies, maple sumac turn color, East River spectacle of British ships, Hudson sparkles, beautiful setting for strange intermission, war many hoped put to rest till spring, not too early. Morning October 9th, hope's end. Phoenix, Roebuck, Tartar Way anchor, brisk southwesterly wind. Proceed up Hudson to force passage beyond Forts Washington, Constitution. Americans tried to block river with sunken hulks, spiked logs. Fort guns open fire. Ships answer. Sail straight, slowly, through to safe anchorage upriver. Washington observed whole sorry scene. To our surprise and mortification, they ran through without the least difficulty. No end of labor. Defense came to nothing. British suffered 9 seamen killed. Considerable damage. Showed Hudson undeniably theirs. Day could lead to decisive change in strategy. Purpose of forts: to deny use of river. Reconsider holding forts. Washington raises no questions. Greene declares confidently, forts so strongly positioned, little more to fear this campaign. Instead of lesson learned, day marks onset of blunder, painful humiliation. British plan, October 12th, to outflank rebels by water. Massive armada set sail upstream East River in very thick fog. Stunning seamanship. By noon, advance force, 4,000 troops, lands at Frog's Neck, Marshy Point, Westchester County. Frog's Neck, Howe's poor choice, peninsula on Mapmore Island at low tide. British advance over Causeway, checked by American riflemen. More American support moves in. After more British troops land, Howe decides to re-embark. Consumes 4 days. Tweedledum business. Reinforcements. Howe expected 7,000 Hessians, worth weight. Howe moves with astonishing speed, landing at Pell's Point, mainland. First report of Frog's Neck landing. Washington knows Harlem Heights bastion trap. British up to former scheme of getting to our rear. Only to strike inland toward King's Bridge. Army must withdraw. Concentrate forces at safer ground, 18 miles north, White Plains. Sterling, Sullivan rejoined Army through prisoner exchanges, nick of time. Warmly welcomed. Congratulations, you're retreating, but the enemy is right behind you. The good news? You made it to White Plains. The bad news? Fort Washington is about to fall. At Council October 16th, Fort Washington Garrison decided retained as long as possible. Passage of ships on Hudson issue. Obstructions insufficient. Communication across river to New Jersey maintained. Washington, Lee, Heath, Sullivan, Sterling, Mifflin present. Knox also present. Only George Clinton dissents. Week before, Congress resolved obstruct effectually Hudson at Fort Washington. Relevance to decision unclear. All of York Island finally evacuated except 1,000 men for Fort Washington. Officially, alteration of our position, not retreat. Commander's orders, October 17th. Tents struck. Men take tent poles. 2 men per company baggage guard. No packs, unless sick. Chairs, tables, benches on wagons. No person unless unable to walk on wagons. Wagons move forward before regiments. Every regiment marching orders. Flints, ammunition complete. Exodus underway. Army crossing narrow bridge at King's Bridge, heading north along west bank of Bronx River. Sick greatest burden. Trek, slow, difficult. Men hauling wagons, cannon. Private Joseph Martin lugs cast iron kettle. size of milk pail, arms dislocated. Puts it down, another shoves it, rolls downhill. Only one that was rid of their iron bondage. First of Army struggles toward White Plains. British swift landing at Pell's Point. Advance force, 4,000 British Hessian. Ashore early morning, unopposed. Move inland. October 18th. From hilltop before dawn, Glover sees upwards of 200 ships. Anxiety for fate of day. Gave 1,000 worlds for Lee or experienced officer present. Acting on own, rushes forward with 750 men. Fight tenaciously behind stone walls, inflict heavy casualties, stall enemy advance for day. Colonel Lomi Baldwin, with small regiment, joins. Men calm as shooting ducks. Enemy dead at least 200. Exaggeration. British lose more men killed at Pell's Point than Brooklyn. Glover's calculations: 8 dead, 13 wounded. Ferocity shown stuns Howe, leads him to conclude with stone walls, more deadly fire waiting. British keep moving inland cautiously, seldom more than few miles a day, against little resistance. Probably Howe, no need to hurry. Doesn't expect to cut rebel retreat. Hopes to maneuver Washington onto open field for decisive victory. Takes few more days at White Plains to be ready. At last, October 28th, 10 days after landing at Pell's Point, Howe sends 13,000 redcoats, Hessians, up Main Road to White Plains. Early morning, sparkling fall day. Washington avoids open field fight. Dug in on high ground back of village, lines over mile. Looks like Howe will attack head on. British field guns open fire. Howe's army marches in perfect order in 2 columns toward Washington's center. Sun shone bright. Their arms glittered, never were shown to more advantage. Suddenly, 1 column wheels left toward Higher Hill on American right, other side of Bronx River. Chatterton's Hill, wooded slopes, open fields above, dominates American lines. Yonder is the ground we ought to occupy, Lee reportedly told Washington. Rushed troops to defend, mainly militia. British artillery moves closer. Cannon roar. Air hills smoked. Fences, ash walls knocked down. Pieces. Men's legs, arms, bodies mingled. Washington orders more men to Chatterton's Hill. British Hessians ford river. Hessians, part of newly arrived 7,000, launch uphill charge. Militia break. Run. Reinforcements. Haslett's Delawares, Smallwood's Marylanders. Fight bravely. Give way. Battle of White Plains. Battle of Chatterton's Hill. British Hessians carry day. Cost: over 250 casualties. Twice Americans suffered. Not victory achieved anything. Day after October 29th, Howe pauses, waits for reinforcements. October 30th, pours rain. November 1st, Howe finds Washington Army pulled back half-mile to stronger position across Bronx River. 2 more days. Armies wait, watch. Enemy determined on something decisive. Knox writes, "Brother, we determined to risk general battle on most advantageous terms." Night. November 3rd, American sentinels report rumbling enemy carriages. Assumed another attack imminent. Stirring among British ranks next day. November 5th morning, to American surprise, whole British army in motion, heading southwest toward Hudson King's Bridge. Congratulations, you've narrowly avoided disaster again. The good news, you're out of White Plains. The bad news, you've divided your army, and a storm is gathering. Opinions here are various. Joseph Reed confides to wife after council. Some generals, British headed for Fort Washington, or Hudson to board ships, attack from rear. Others, majority, finding army strongly posted, changed, plan, intend to penetrate Jerseys to Philadelphia. Who said what most in meeting? Reed doesn't mention. His opinion: too late for British movements of consequence other than excursions into New Jersey to revive loyalists. Washington doubts Howe will close campaign without attempting something more. Almost certainly, Howe heads for New Jersey. Nearing letter close, Washington adds further worry. Expect the enemy will bend their force against Fort Washington and invest it immediately. Invest, meaning surround, lay siege. Washington still exhausted, dispirited. To closest, seems bewildered, indecisive. Reed having second thoughts about Washington's capacity, increasingly worried over Fort Washington. Commander ponders, pulling troops out, while time. Letter to Greene, November 8th. Inclined to think, prudent to abandon fort, leaves decision to Greene. On the spot. Now on spot, Washington can't decide. Let's decision be Greene's. Excellency Washington has been with me, but finally nothing concluded on. Greene writes Knox. Central to consideration, Hudson River, looms large. Washington dispatched Lee south from Cambridge to fortify New York. Hudson key to British strategy. British take care of unfinished business Fort Washington, or cross over, strike New Jersey, or both. What should be done? Howe Army reached Dobbs Ferry on Hudson, moving south. Once again, Washington divides army 4 ways. 7,000 troops, largest part, remain east of Hudson under Lee. Check British move on New England. Heath and 3,000 guard Hudson Highlands at Peekskill. Washington, what's left, 2,000, cross to other side, New Jersey, expected to be joined by N.J. Penn reinforcements. Greene maintains same position on river. Overall command troops at Fort Washington, chart Lee. Washington, $2,000, leave White Plains, November 10th. Mid-morning, November 12th, at Peekskill, crosses Hudson, heads south for New Jersey, reaching Fort Lee, November 13th. 65-mile march in 3 days. For better part of 2 days, he and Greene confer. Greene, yet to fight battle, optimistic, convinced Fort Washington held, especially doubled troops, over 2,000. Remarkable reversal of roles. Washington refused abandon. New York in September, ready now. Greene saw no reason to stay day longer on York Island, wanted to avoid crisis. Now Greene wants to stand on last bit of island, argues it keeps communications open, ties up British troops, possibly leads to slaughter like Bunker Hill. Retreat, devastating to Army's demoralized state, despite formidable presence over river, steep, rock-bound approaches. Fort Washington, not impregnable. Irregular Pentagon plan. 4 acres. Walls, piled earth. No barracks, no water, hauled from below. Not what needed for long siege with winter. Nonetheless, Commander Magaw thinks fort held till end December. Greene agrees. Washington's letter to Greene from White Plains, November 8th. Inclined to think, prudent abandon fort, decision to Greene. On the spot. Now on spot. Can't decide. Let's decision be Greene's. Movements, designs of enemy, not yet understood. Washington reports Hancock. To British Captain Frederick Mackenzie, all but perfect campaigning weather. Frost nearly every night, disappears with sun. Only thing lacking stiff breeze for Navy. No wind for some days past. November 7th. Entry. Howe headquarters 6 miles above King's Bridge. Next move. Probably against Fort Washington. Mackenzie never doubted. Reduction of fort first object. Confident of success due to timely intelligence. If Washington failed to understand British designs, British now knew a lot about American situation. November 2nd, Howe's army still at White Plains. American Staff Officer William Demont turns traitor, defects from Fort Washington, brings copies of fort plans, cannon placement, accounts of discontent, animosity between New Englanders south. Only days before packet of letters by Washington read, staff wound up in British hands, left unguarded at inn in Trenton. Washington complained bitterly of lack of discipline, scorn of dreaming, sleepy-headed officers. Another letter by Lieutenant Colonel Robert Harrison reveals far more important. Washington dividing army. Purloined letters. De Mont's treachery may not alter events greatly, but British consider windfall. Mackenzie Diary. Searle attest. Washington's decision to divide army clearest sign of weakness. Easy to see whither all this tends. If rebels can't act under present numbers, courage won't increase on strength reduction. Letters service to General Howe. British picked up information from deserters about state of things at Fort Washington. Plans, De Mont's account confirmation. Famously cautious William Howe supposedly never risks frontal attack on fortified position. Bunker Hill lesson, about to disprove theory. Full agreement of commanders. Mackenzie, total confidence in attack. Predicts as soon as Fort Washington taken, Howe moves on to New Jersey. Rebel troops from N.J. Penn, Washington, counted on never materialized. Mackenzie leaves little to prevent our arrival at Philadelphia. November 12th, day Washington crosses Hudson, Howe's army within 4 miles Kings Bridge. Plan 4-part assault, Hessian's major role. Plan unfolds midday November 15th. Howe sends Colonel James Patterson under white flag to deliver message to American commander Colonel Magaw at Fort Washington. Same British officer July carried peace letters. This time, ultimatum: surrender, fort, or face annihilation. Told 2 hours to decide, Magaw responds at once in writing, "If I rightly understand, this post is to be immediately surrendered. I rather think it is a mistake. Act a part so unworthy of himself, actuated by the most glorious cause. I am determined to defend this post to the very last extremity. How? No intention of slaughter. Ultimatum plays on fears." Magaw's bold response, based on belief he, men, could hold out or escape across Hudson after dark. Congratulations, you've lost Fort Washington. The good news? The war isn't over yet. The bad news? It's the most devastating blow of the campaign so far. When word of ultimatum, Magaw's answer, reaches Fort Lee, Nathaniel Greene dispatches Ryder to Washington. Washington dashes back, arrives Fort Lee nightfall. Greene, Putnam rode across river to meet Magaw, appraise situation. Washington follows in small boat. Halfway across, meets Greene Putnam returning. Mid-river and dark, Greene Putnam give encouraging report. Troops in high spirits would make good defense. Being late at night, Washington says, 3 return to Fort Lee. Same night, unobserved, British bring 30 flatboats upriver with muffled oars, past Fort Washington, into Spuyten-Duyvil Creek, down Harlem, ready for morning. First chance, early Saturday, November 16th, Washington with Greene, Putnam, Mercer again crosses Hudson to determine what was best to be done. Boat pushes off, sound of heavy cannon carries over water. Off in distance, left of Fort Washington. Sea attack begun. Landing opposite shore, downriver from fort. 4 generals scramble up steep slopes to crest near Morris House. All stood in a very awkward situation. Greene writes, disposition made. Enemy advancing. Durst not make new disposition. Still couldn't see disaster. Urged Washington leave. Go back. Greene volunteers stay. Putnam. Mercer also. Washington thinks it best. They all go. Assault from 3 directions after prolonged pounding. 4,000 Hessians from north. Over. Bridge at King's Bridge. Led by Knyphausen. Requested honor main attack. Hessians professionals. Performed duty. Day to show superior in profession taken pride in. Sterling. Prisoner. Heard Hessian officers remark duty. Not inquire which side right. Force of British under Cornwallis. Highlanders, strike east, crossing Harlem River in flatboats, brought up night. Third force, 3,000, British Hessians, south, led by Percy. By 10 o'clock, Howe committed 8,000 troops, nearly 4 times defending force. Farthest reach of outer defenses 5 miles. Knyphausen's Hessians face steepest terrain, withering fire from VA-MD riflemen among rocks. Ferocious fighting. Hessians, dauntless. Rock slopes scaled rough even without fire. Officer Wiederhold. Attack. Almost inaccessible rock. Every obstacle swept aside. Precipitous rocks scaled. Hessian soldier Ruber. Obliged to drag ourselves by beech tree bushes. Could not really stand. At last, on hilltop. Trees, stones. Hard time. No idea of yielding. Rahl gives word. All that are my grenadiers, march forwards. Drummers strike up march. Hautboy players blew. All alive shouted, hurrah! Mingled together, Americans, Hessians. No more firing. Ran forward pell-mell upon fortress. Grant disliked Hessians almost as much as Americans. Writes admiration how they surmounted every difficulty. Gaining heights, kept on, at a trot. Knyphausen had not stopped Rahl, convinced he would be in fort 5 minutes. Other sides of attack advanced. Some American defenders little resistance, others fight tenaciously. Graydon commanded company facing Percy's assault from south. 150 men, single 18-pound cannon held off 800 British. Percy's attacking troops capture Morris House, 15 minutes after Washington general's exit. Courage not enough. Americans too few. Extended lines. Only recourse retreat to fort, with speed. 17-year-old Private John Adlam ran distance uphill, hardly breath. As I was a good deal fatigued, walked to the fort, very leisurely. Near Fort British Firefield piece, with round shot at huddles between fort lines, within Abitus. Ball took part of 2 men's heads, wounded another, went into fort. By 1 o'clock, defending force driven inside fort, scarcely room. Hour later, Hessian commander Knyphausen demands surrender. Maga time to decide, asks half hour. Howe arrives, orders surrender immediately. No terms other than promise of lives. 3 o'clock, Maga capitulates. 4 o'clock, entire garrison, 2,137 Americans, marches out between lines of Hessians, lay down arms. Disastrous campaign for New York. Humiliating, costly, reverse after another. Surrender of Fort Washington. Most devastating blow, utter catastrophe. Taking 1,000 prisoners at Brooklyn, dreadful loss. Now over twice that number marched off. Total nearly 4,000 from 2 battles. Army rapidly disintegrating from sickness, desertions. Desperate need, almost anyone fit. Mackenzie. British astonished prisoners, less than 15, or old men, indifferently clothed, filthy, without shoes. Odd figures, frequently excited laughter. Crushing defeat. Fort Washington, garrison capture, arms, tools, tents, blankets, 146 brass iron cannon, accomplished by British Hessians in hours. Need never happened. 59 Americans killed, 100 plus wounded. British 28 killed, 100 plus wounded. Hessian 58 killed, 250 plus wounded. Bad, but could be worse. Grant Mackenzie view. Slaughter avoided only because Knyphausen stopped Rahl Hessians entering fort. Carnage would then have been dreadful. Rebels numerous, not room to defend. So frightened, not power. Ahead for prisoners. Horror. Held captive, overcrowded, unheated barns, sheds, British prison ships in harbor. Hundreds die disease. Washington, said to have wept, watching tragedy unfold across river. Unlikely, given imperturbability, but surely wept within soul. Faced ruin before, never like this. To Brother Jack, wearied almost to death with retrograde motions. Nathaniel Greene in anguish to Knox. Feel mad, vexed, sick, sorry. Never did I need consoling voice. Most terrible event. Consequences justly dreaded. Both Washington Greene badly mistaken. Worried reputations. Hard to say which most sensitive to thought of others. Criticism severe, especially among prisoners. Graydon, generation later, barely contains disdain. Most immediate, blistering reaction, Charles Lee. Own account, furious over Fort Washington news, tore out hair. Must entreat you keep what I say to yourself, but I foresaw, predicted, all that has happened, wrote Rush, influential Congress member. Lee knew Rush would never keep it to himself. Lee claimed last words to Washington, draw off garrison, or they will be lost. Oh, General, Lee admonishes Washington in letter, why would you be over-persuaded by men of inferior judgment? Inviting Commander blame Greene. Washington failed to override Greene's judgment, make clear decision. Commander-in-Chief, ultimately responsible. Greene's responsibility ceased with Washington's arrival, November 13th. Washington never blamed himself for loss, never openly blamed Greene, said only acted on judgment of others, nor did he fire Greene. Undoubtedly thought less of young General, still knew Greene's strengths. Weeks before, Greene demonstrated foresight, organization, recommended supply depots across New Jersey, Army's retreat path. Washington agreed. Greene needed. Like Knox, never give up, walk away, lose sight of war. Washington repays loyalty. After bad decisions, wisest decision ever. Only one American hero emerges from Fort Washington, Margaret Molly Corbin, wife of Penn soldier John Corbin, went into battle at husband's side. Killed, she stepped into place to load fire cannon. Fell wounded, nearly losing arm. After surrender, allowed return home to Pennsylvania. Usually unhurried, William Howe makes next move. Hardly a pause. 3 nights later, sends 4,000 British Hessian troops under darkness, drenching rain across Hudson. Land upstream Fort Lee at Gloucester. Led by Cornwallis, scale palisades, steep footpath. Once on top, advance on Fort Lee. Daring attack like Howe's at Quebec. Warning reaches Fort Lee, advance. Possibly local farmer or British deserter. Washington rushes, seen from Hackensack, shouts orders, abandon fort at once. Everything left behind. Guns, stores, tents, breakfast cooking. British arrive, find place deserted, but dozen men got into rum supply, all drunk. Washington Army flee, in haste down road over Hackensack River, farther into New Jersey. Congratulations, you've retreated across New Jersey. The good news? You're still alive. The bad news? Your army is battered, dispirited, and shrinking rapidly. Retreat southward across New Jersey begins November 21st, headed for crossing Aquakanonk on Passaic River. Retreat only choice. River's possible defense in dead flat country. No stone walls. Over Passaic, push on 20 miles to Newark. Heavy rains, narrow roads sloppy with mud. Men in tatters, many without shoes. Feet wrapped in rags. Washington rides rear of column. Point remembered by James Monroe, 18, Virginia lieutenant. Saw him head small band, near enemy. Countenance, manner impressed Monroe. Monroe estimates Washington at most 3,000 men. Expression no sign of worry. Deportment so firm, dignified, yet so modest. Never seen in any other person. Washington sets army on road early morning, but gets off urgent request to Lee at North Castle, NY. Worries, troubles clear. Men broken and dispirited. No tents, baggage, entrenching tools. Left behind at Fort Lee. Dared not risk contact with enemy, so must leave a very fine country open to their ravages. Urges Lee cross Hudson with brigades. Join forces before too late. New Jersey too rich prize. Give up without appearance of fight. NJ fall. Devastating effect on Pennsylvania. In less than 2 weeks, December 1st, enlistments of 2,000 troops up, free to go. Same nightmare prospect, faced at Boston, year before. Misery greater. Morale, suffering. Chance army evaporates. Privately, Washington talks with Reed possibility retreating to western Pennsylvania. Reed thinks if eastern Penn gives up, rest of state follows. Washington hand over throat, remarks, "My neck does not feel as though it was made for a halter." Talks retreating to mountains, Augusta County, western VA. If overpowered, must cross the Allegheny Mountains. New enemy little idea how big country. Problem, not few American soldiers in 13 states. Plenty. States reluctant send troops. Prefer keep home, especially war not going well. August, Washington had 20,000. 3 months since, lost 4 battles. Brooklyn, Kipps Bay, White Plains, Fort Washington. Gave up Fort Lee. Army divided. Young Monroe speculated only 3,500 under personal command. Desperate for help, sends Reed to Burlington, NJ, upstream Philadelphia. Impress NJ Governor Livingston, urgent need reinforcements. NJ militia not turning out in numbers, making difference. General Mifflin dispatched similar mission. Philadelphia, alert Congress, critical state of our affairs, round up Penn troops. 2 critical undertakings, choice of Reed, closest confidant, and Mifflin, able Philadelphian, shown valor at Brooklyn. Washington confident, sending 2 best men, not lost on listeners. First report, Mifflin bitterly disappointing. Pennsylvanians, divided and lethargic, slumbering under shade of peace. From Reed, nothing. Rained heavily. November 22nd, Army reached Newark. Rain fell, night, next day. Sufferings endured are beyond description. No tent. Exposed. Cold. Rains. Day. Night. Samuel Webb. Impossible describe conditions. No lads ever showed greater activity retreating than we have. Best fellows at business. Webb, recovered from wounds, on Washington's staff. Greatest importance, impression made on Thomas Paine, author Common Sense, volunteered aid Green's staff. Green, love literature, political philosophy, liked brilliant Paine. Green raised Quaker, pamphlet widely read, called him Common Sense. Common Sense and call snarl, perpetually wrangling.